Okay, we are live.
Right, good morning and welcome to the House Environment Committee. This morning, we are going to hear from Skip Lyle, the president of the Beaver Deceivers International. Welcome, Skip Lyle.
Thank you, Amy. Oh, but
Go
listen,
ahead.
I don't always say time. I got a lot of slides, so that's good. And I'll probably too many, so I'll try to go through them fast. And it's a very broad subject. Yeah, I sneak water away from beavers for a living, or an attempted living anyway. But it's important to understand sort of the historical context, and a lot of other things, the value of wetlands, et cetera. And then I thought that this, the testimony you're getting from me was associated with your Bill 276. So I model my title because of that. I was just so impressed that you guys have introduced an attempt to recreate some old growth forest. Because it's really important to understand what is natural, because natural is what all native species evolved in. We can say for 10,000 years, we'll do it post-glaciation or glacial retreat. So that's really important. And those are the types of habitats that are going to represent, our, really stable, good, healthy ecosystems. So it's good to recreate them to the extent that we can. And so I just think it's wonderful. It's so progressive. And it's probably, I don't know if there's any other state that's proposed such a thing. But it's and I said a lot of what I'm going to say today, I said in the written testimony I provided. But beavers are, if you think of looking at Vermont 500 years ago from 30,000 feet, and it's just all old growth forests. And then you see some lakes and big rivers and everything, almost everything else is little speckles of beaver. I call them flowages, beaver created wetlands. They're such a unique type of wetland that they really need their own name. And I didn't make it up. I heard it used in Maine and adopted it years ago. And so, so we're in the then beavers were wiped out by the fur trade. People trade in furs today. So that's something different. I'm talking about this enormous event where it was just crazy extirpation of beavers from roughly 1600 to 1900.
Can I just interrupt? Have you changed your slide? Because we're still seeing the first slide.
It's the first slide.
Okay, I didn't know if you'd already said.
Yeah. Anyway, so because of the fur trade, all those, beaver dams are made of sticks and mud, and without beavers to maintain them, they quickly lose their reservoirs and the wetlands drain out. And over the course of the fur trade, they all just winked out for hundreds of years. And so a lot of native species were lost. And so the beautiful thing is that they barely survived extinction, and they've made a wonderful recovery. And so that's going to be might be a 200-year process of sort of remolding those wetlands and trying to get back to native vegetation. And so we're right in the middle of it, and it's very hopeful. And now I'll show you some pictures associated with those thoughts. Let's see, there's the arrow. Nope, nothing's happening when I hit the right arrow.
Might take a second.
Oh, really?
Well, not too long, but
Yeah, not probably that long. Wait a minute. This reminds me, I wanted to thank you all for inviting me. And I wanted to thank Annika too for all her help.
We did 3 practice runs of this then.
did you have the slideshow open before we went live? Because sometimes I feel like that.
We
Toggle.
could stop sharing and reshare.
But anyway, I can keep on.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
got the,
I mean, we have your
Oh,
slide.
good,
Yeah.
oh, good.
so here,
Okay.
I'll share with Sarita and then you work off that,
Oh,
okay?
my goodness. Where's the arrow forward it?
Just scroll. You can,
Just scroll?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, if you go.
Oh, thanks,
Yep, yep.
thanks so much.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. So Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
You're
There
very
we
kind.
go, there we go.
Now it's working.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you got a backup if you
Okay.
need it.
Thank you very much, Annika. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, that's it. They're the beavers. Anyway, they're really oh, I should face you, right? They're really a remarkable animal. I consider them our most valuable animal because wetlands are so incredibly valuable. They're rare and they're rich and they're just so important for wildlife. And then, of course, they have all kinds of really valuable hydrological functions. But as you can see by the flatness of the cranium, thanks to that feature, I can barely fool them and sneak water away from them. So they're magnificent animals, but we humans can outsmart them, and we can solve the beaver-human conflict entirely without the need to constantly kill them. Yeah, I mentioned the fur trade. It's in big letters because it was just a huge event that still affects the landscape today, and it will for a long time. So this in normal times, a wetland, you might call it a marsh, a beaver flowage. We don't have trees that grow in the water, and so it's basically an open marsh. Occasionally the dams will breach and it becomes a wet meadow briefly, but generally speaking, I don't think they had the time required to become forested, but that all changed with the fur trade. And you see how the beaver dam in the background is perfectly level. So when beavers are present and they've recently maintained a dam, it has a greater chance of surviving flood events because the water will sheet over the whole top of it evenly. And so as soon as the beavers leave or are removed, it starts to decay and it gets uneven and you get a low spot and then you get high flows and it cuts right through it. And so this author of this children's book from many decades ago had that obvious observation figured out. So that's what happened. So here's a picture in the wild of a breached dam, and so that's what they look like very quickly. So there's no real wetland, no real reservoir. So it's still a valuable habitat, but not nearly as valuable both hydrologically and ecologically as a one with an intact dam and a marsh or a reservoir. And so when I was in graduate school at the University of Maine, I studied the return of beavers to the landscape. And the first aerial photographs in this watershed I studied had no flowages. It was just, they had all become forested. And that reminds me to note that where beavers dam is really predicated by physics. So they're damming the exact same places they did for forever, or certainly for 10,000 years. So nothing is new. When a lot of people, because we haven't had beavers around for a long time, they'll think, well, beavers were never there before, but that's not true. It's really a return to what was always there before. So they wink out in the absence of beavers. This is a modern beaver flowage, a tiny little thing, but I just use it as an example. Do you see how woody it is? I mean, this is completely unnatural. This is because there's been no beavers there for 400 years. And so it just became all woody, but that's not natural. And the beavers quickly go through the trees and they begin to restore it back to a more natural and less woody type of habitat. But it's really cool. These dead trees that only had the chance to grow in these flowages because of the fur trade are a symbol of the arrival of Europeans 400 years ago. So it's really kind of cool, and beautiful. I mean, I love it. I find it fascinating. And they're great wildlife habitat, but they're a fleeting phenomenon. It's not going to happen again. So enjoy those dead trees. And so over time they start to fall over. So you can judge the rough date that beavers return to one of their ancient flowages by the condition of the timber. And that first slide, beavers had only dammed that maybe 5-10 years ago. This one maybe 20 or 30 years. And this one you see it was all forested, but the trees have had time to fall over. So it's all stumpy. So that might have been, say, 1950. They might have been one of the first places that beavers returned to as they recovered from the fur trade, beginning about 100 years ago. I think that might even be a bird's nest in that tall dead snag, but you often see them, and, particularly heron's nests. And yeah, just another example of that woodiness, that wonderful woodiness of flowages. And this is out in Nevada. So this happened across the entire continent. The same pattern is transpiring anywhere you're in a forested region. And I'm going to digress just briefly because I just did some research recently that was really interesting. This is just the most magnificent beaver country I've seen, certainly in Vermont and maybe anywhere. But you can see something about the topography. It's down in just east of Bennington in Woodford in the Green Mountain National Forest. And it's just something about this. It's kind of a hilly plain in between the big mountains. And so there's a lot of, and of course, everywhere in Vermont, it's very wet. There's just a lot of opportunities for beavers to create these flowages. And there's just a great density here. And I visited probably 100 on my skis a few weeks ago. And so you can tell in active, the big black spot to the top is actually a man-made dam that does not have beavers in it. And so you can tell, roughly, this photograph or image from the satellite was about 10 years old. And so even then you can see that there were very few beavers because the water had gone out. There's just, when the beavers aren't there, it looks yellow or light green. And when they are there, it looks black because they're maintaining the dam and the reservoir. And so I was shocked, there's fewer beavers there now than there were 10 years ago. So these little, I don't know, do you see my pointer up there?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, see these little black areas? Those are active. Beavers are damming those and maintaining the dams. Those are gone. So there's nothing, very, very few beavers up here in the best beaver habitat in the state, really. And then that's Route 9. And then here's south of Route 9. And you see the same thing. And these are great, a lot of these are great habitats. They're very big. And so just a very, very low beaver population. You see these little black ones? Those are not active. The beavers are gone there. And so there's hardly any beavers around Woodford State Park. So something's going on. It's probably trapping because in the absence of disease, it's just there aren't any wild predators that can wipe beavers out really efficiently. They'll pick one off here and there, but there's nothing like humans for efficiency. I mean, hundreds of years ago with much cruder tools, we wiped them out across the whole continent. And so the modern traps are even better, a lot better. So, hey, here's a really interesting feature, guys. You see this light line all the way across there? Does it show up?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a tornado strike.
Oh.
Yeah, it's maybe 20, 30 years ago or something. Man, it couldn't have happened in a more perfect place because there's no people anywhere near there. And here's just a close-up of one of those flowages. This one's about 15 acres. I love Google Earth and other companies that provide these satellite images, and the flowages are so fascinating. And this is a really good habitat because, I should note that beavers are territorial, so you never have more than one family, and they'll defend pretty large territories. So you'll never have more than one family of beavers here. And a couple of qualities: size equals good habitat, and then thing called the dam length, wetland perimeter, the ratio between those two things. So a short dam saves the beavers tons of energy. And so that's really attractive. That's why road culverts always get clogged. And I call them narrow man-made outlets to a little broader, things like man-made dam outlets. But it's primarily a culvert issue. So very long perimeter, very short dam, just a fantastic, beautiful habitat. There haven't been beavers there seemingly in decades. You see, the trees are starting to grow in here, and so they wouldn't have had the opportunity to grow there. It would have been too wet otherwise. So something's going on down there. This is the same area that's growing in these evergreens. to me, that's an immediate indication that beavers haven't been around in a long time. And there's a lot of food, a lot of hardwood. Not that the presence of hardwood is that necessarily that critical. I think that aquatic plants, things like water lilies, cattails, water shield are extremely important, probably more important. The hardwood stuff is most important in helping beavers store food to get through winter. And this is on Route 9. So when you have an infrastructure that's not protected, you're essentially obligated to wipe beavers out, because it's just a huge valuable piece of real estate here, Route 9. You can't have it flooded. We just simply cannot have clogged culverts. So in the absence of what I call high quality flow devices that solve these problems non-lethally, you have no choice but to wipe beavers out. You can't just take some beavers. One beaver could clog that, quite well in a night. And this, I'm going to talk about dams because the state is talking about dams this week at a couple public events. And these road culverts there's very little difference between them and a dam outlet. You're still dealing with watersheds of all sizes. In fact, it can even be worse because oftentimes a dam will have an overflow. So if you do have a clogging, you still get a relief. If a road culvert like this gets clogged, there's no relief. The next thing you know, it's going over the road. So it's very serious, very, very challenging, but doable. Yeah. So when I talk about flow devices, I think it's something that has a certain level of sophistication that's going to be able to survive both survive the elements and essentially sneak water away from beavers. And unfortunately, a lot of stuff gets put out there, and I've been doing it for decades, and it's a big challenge for me. And I like to think I build them really well, and I still have problems sometimes. So it's just not taken that seriously as a significant engineering challenge, and we need to change that. It never gets the money or attention it deserves. So a lot of so-called flow devices that are put out there, they have no chance of working. They always fail. And then people draw the conclusion that, well, beavers are too smart. We can never solve this problem. And then they double down on killing. So in terms of making progress on this issue, we're actually losing ground. And so this is not efficient. This is what happens when you don't protect a culvert over and over and over again, to the tune of millions of dollars. And this has been going on at the same sites, for the past 75 years. Endless cycles of killing and cleaning, and incredibly inefficient, expensive, and harmful to the environment when you get all the beavers in. So we gotta become more efficient. And then grates are the simplest possible alternative. All a grate is a symbol of a lethal strategy. It's just you're just keeping the beavers from directly clogging the culvert until you can get somebody there to kill them. So that's just, it's meaningless in terms of solving the problem. And then if you get a big flood and you have a grate on your culvert, you've just like that, you've lost most of the capacity of your culvert. Then you're going to have a washed out road. So that's no good. And this is just no good at all. I mean, even in the absence of beavers, in a flood situation, the leaves would clog that solid. And it does nothing really to solve the beaver problem. And there's another case of just waiting to kill the beavers. That's all it is. And then you get structures like this, just kind of hopeless, I'm afraid to say, and that you just see them everywhere. Yeah, it's kind of a waste of money and time. So I'm going to start talking about my early career at the Penobscot Nation soon, and we invented a couple of flow devices there that are probably the most commonly used ones in the world now. I've moved on to much better ones, but they're still used by a lot of people. And so I came up with this idea. These are Penobscot inventions. I was just an employee there. But I came up with this idea of a trapezoidal fence, but this isn't mine. This isn't one of mine. Ours were big and really rugged. But I broadcast, I was so excited to help people solve this problem and to indirectly create wetlands. And I really published it and gave a lot of talks and stuff. And then now I drive around the landscape and I see these little tiny, hopeless trapezoidal fences everywhere. No chance of working. So here's a Penobscot sign. There's a beaver. Got a beaver on the sign. Anyway, I owe them a lot. And this is my friend Nick Sapiel, who's in one of our early hopeless flow devices. I mean, we started out just like everybody else. Not, we were full of energy and confidence, but we had a lot to learn. I thought I'd solve the problem in a year, and now I'm still wrestling with it 30 years later. We put a little deck on that's a concept that's been ongoing, that where the opportunity allows to deck them so people can sit and enjoy viewing wildlife. And this is our other invention. We call it, anyway, that we started calling the flow devices we use to protect road culverts. We called those beaver deceivers, and then we called this one, which is a pipe system to be used in regular beaver dams with a round fence filter. We called that the Caster Master, and also broadcast that to the world. That's you see that everywhere now under the name Pond Leveler, but that's a Penobscot Nation invention and product. And that's one of our bigger trapezoidal fences. And this is a more modern beaver deceiver. This is a pipe system that just goes to a beaver dam, but the new filters are called square fence filters. And the wood you see on top is a whirlpool break. So you get a pressure differential, and a whirlpool develops at the end of the pipe, and that just screams leak to beavers. And then no matter how big and good your filter is, they bury it. So that's a really important component of a good filter. And for scale, I had this big fat guy stand on the beaver deceiver in Lincoln. And again, this is a man-made dam. I'm going to show you a lot of pictures of man-made dams because the state has been telling people that beaver deceivers can't protect man-made dams, and they use that term. I hope they didn't mean my products. But yeah, this, as I said, not most of them aren't really much different than the average road culvert, and it can be done, no problem. And it's really the only way to truly solve the problem, as I've mentioned. That otherwise you're just endless killing cycles. Another one. This is a big 18-inch diameter pipe, and another one. This is in Moncton. Moncton's been a great town. They've been really good to me and my company. And another man-made one. This is in the White Mountain National Forest. Hey, in Middlebury College, some great people there. And this is the state of New York. This is a wildlife management area. You can see the viewing deck. And I'm not finished. This is just the beginning of that beaver deceiver. And this is I did this in Jeffersonville on a man-made dam for the Vermont Land Trust. And this is for the state of New York at a wildlife management area, another man-made dam, and another one, and another one in New Hampshire. So that's my man-made dam shots. But you can see how tall this railroad here is here. So you just think, oftentimes the railroads are taller than the roads we drive on. And so, boy, just a disaster if that culvert gets clogged. And I included this picture because I mold the devices to fit the site, and every site is different. So you can if you take that approach and build good devices, you can solve the problem anywhere. And this is Amtrak Railroad. So you're talking high value, really high value sites. And this one, I just wanted to show the floating leaf plants here. So this probably represents, combined with territorial behavior, it represents a permanent beaver habitat because of the aquatic vegetation. So much to eat there. And another value to, another argument for keeping beavers in, say, ponds or lakes in state parks is that they have many values not associated with building dams. Like, for instance, sometimes these ponds can get so thick with the floating leaf leaves, you can't even paddle a canoe through them. So the beavers really keep that thinned out. That's really helpful. And the lodges are tremendous microhabitats. They dig holes into banks, and those are microhabitats too for a lot of animals. And then, you know, they're great. Having live beavers in a pond is a great educational opportunity for adults and kids. And, you know, a lot of people just like to see them. So that'd be an aesthetic value. A lot of values are sacrificed if you go with a extirpation policy. This is my friend David in Alaska where I worked. This is you see, I put you know, my standard filter, I doubled the size of it because Alaska's a long ways away. So I wanted to build in a little extra security.
Can I,
And the beavers look really weird there.
can I just,
I couldn't understand that.
That is a weird looking beaver.
Yeah, yeah. What, Amy?
I just I think it would be helpful if you could just explain what you're doing with, you know, you're maintaining the flow that the beaver's not aware of.
Yeah, yeah,
How are you keeping the culvert from getting,
yeah.
well, we're looking at all these really good examples, I think just
Yeah, you're right.
of the basic.
work.
You're absolutely right. You're just supposed to know that automatically.
We don't.
Yeah. The trouble with that is that I could talk, you know, I could discuss that for days. So I'll
We have a
try.
hard stop with our legislative council at 5 minutes till 10. So,
It's 5 up?
no, we need to be finished in 25 minutes,
Okay, yeah. Okay, and you guys want to ask questions
maybe,
in addition,
yes.
the point you make.
But I just think,
Okay,
you
yeah,
see,
a lot of people ask that question.
Yeah.
And I've come to begin answering by saying, you got to understand that beavers don't think like humans. They do very little deductive reasoning. So mostly they're just responding to environmental stimuli. So I'm trying to quell, and that would be the sound, feel, and look of leaks. And so I'm trying to eliminate all those. And also and then, you know, every site's different, but sometimes you can actually use your device to kind of destroy the damming habitat. You know, they can't make a dam right across. So it's a combination of those things. And so particularly all the deceiving takes place in the pipe systems, because beavers, they don't, unlike humans, they don't step back and look at the big picture. You know, they just like myopic like that. Thank God.
I mean, so far you're describing a lot of what humans do. You're saying,
Lot of
not
what?
like, you're saying we're not like them, but I'm hearing a lot of what we are like too.
Yeah.
Maybe we're a lot like them, more than we want to admit.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, they don't step back and say, well, obviously that's a pipe, and of course it's hollow. They've never experienced pipes in their evolutionary history, so they don't know what it is unless they can hear the water moving in there. They don't know what it is, and so, you know, but if you're a smart beaver, you'd say, well, yeah, then we start damming out there on the square fence filter, let's say. But they rarely do that unless you do a bad job designing it and it's creating a whirlpool or something. So they'll start in the corner and they just can't make any process. The fence on the culvert, I call a receiver fence because it receives the pipe system. So they'll start there, but you're sneaking the water away from them way out there. And they're kind of programmed to look for dam leaks in dams. And so you're just moving the leak far away and then creating a nice big filter where, if you can imagine the water molecules, as they enter the pipe, they're going really fast, right? And beavers would pick up on that without any trouble at all. So you're trying to sneak those filters in around a long perimeter very slowly and subtly. And then it's an incredibly harsh environment. The acidic water will dissolve raw steel quickly, and then floods and ice, you know, can destroy things. So in addition to that, I try to make them really, really durable. And you'll see that the fencing is green. That's epoxy coated, heavy gauge epoxy coated wire. If you don't use that, it's just not going to last very long at all. So I'll try to go fast. There's a lot to this, and you know, if you guys feel you have an important question, ask at any time. That'll ensure that we get it in. Anyway, so this is beavers in northern Alaska. You know, no forest, nothing to eat, little tiny flowage, and they eke out a living. You know, mostly on willows, because willows have this wonderful ability to resprout when the beavers snip them. So this is not a reflection of an overpopulation. This is just how beavers live in a lot of places and what they do. Another double filter system. So yeah, the beavers will start, you know, they'll always start down here. They don't step back. You know, if they were smart, they'd dam right up there. But And this is a very big pipe, so, you know, what I do is the bare minimum, I think that has any chance of working. It's, and every year I say, I got to make these things bigger and better. But this is an 18-inch diameter pipe, so it moves a lot of water. Here's a square fence that got buried. So this happens from time to time, but I never give up. I never give up. As long as my customers don't give up on me, I then will add filter sections, and, you know, so this is what I did here. Just make them bigger, and you know, you can always win. And it always, I think, is good economics. Just as just an example of another type of filter that other people build relative to mine. So it's just, these devices are pretty robust compared to the average. This is in Lincoln, one of my favorite towns, and this is a beaver/turtle door. So this is a busy road. So when beavers come through that culvert, I want to shunt them out here towards us and away from the fence. And so this is a rare example of a site that was so small I didn't add a pipe system, but I could. If the beavers start to dam around that, I could add a little pipe system. And this is also in Lincoln, in the shadow of Mount Abe. Again, an 18-inch diameter pipe, just very big, robust stuff. And this is on the downstream from Stowe, where they've had some problems. There's a long culvert that the beavers come through from the river to get into the village and cause trouble. So this is just a beaver barrier. And you can see the plank on the left. That's to allow dispersing beavers to leave. But any new beavers coming in, I don't want them in the village. And this is in up in Northern California. They sold redwood. They sold redwood in Home Depot. So that was a pleasure to work with. A series of pictures here to show you the value of not killing beavers, and how oftentimes you can create nearby non-threatening wetlands just upstream from the flow device. So just it's a tremendous opportunity, and there's hundreds and hundreds of such opportunities. This site is actually in Vermont. I've created a starter dam to get beavers going there, but so this is my house. I mean, my parents bought this property in 1965. The beavers had not yet returned from the fur trade. There wasn't a quarter acre of wetlands, and so you can see it's black. And that's because we haven't killed the beavers, and they've been there, a steady presence of beavers in a relatively small habitat for 50 years. And as a result, you know, every time we get a big flood, I've never lost a dam. They're all well maintained. And this series of flowages stores a lot of floodwater every time. And that's the idea behind getting more beaver dams on the landscape. Yes, occasionally they'll break during a flood, but most of them hold up and act as sponges, reducing peak downstream flows. And you see the road went right through the middle of our property. So as a teenager, I built the first beaver deceiver right there, and that's I've been able to get off that train ever since. But it's just adds so much value to our property. It's just, we're just watching wildlife, all kinds of wildlife all the time. It's just amazing. And this is back to the Penobscot Nation. You can, every one of these sites I show you, we didn't have to kill the beavers because we protected a road culvert. And this is what happened, this series of wonderful flowages at this site. And that's just massive one. The beavers were damming the culvert here. They were living up here, but they were moving down there to dam the culvert. So if we had killed them and not protected it non-lethally, all these wetlands would have been lost. And this is really flat country north of Bangor, and these wetlands are huge. So it was a tremendous, here's another one. You see the white spots are beaver lodges. So just at these three sites on the Penobscot land, we protected and created indirectly close to 400 acres of wetlands. The federal government will often pay humans to build man-made wetlands, $500,000 an acre, you know, in recognition of the tremendous value of hydrological and ecological value of wetlands. So this is a kind of opportunity that we have at a lot of places in Vermont. None like this, because we don't have that kind of flat country, but here's just a broader picture of that area, both those sites together. Absent dam building, beavers still have great ecological, educational, spiritual, and aesthetic value. And I think I already said that, but I want to make sure I got it in there. I'm getting real close to the end, guys. But this is, I make this point largely because of this issue of extirpating beavers from man-made ponds in state parks. That, it's not always just the dam and the wetland. In this case, the beavers aren't even creating a dam. It's just a wetland there. And you see, this was occupied by beavers very early in the last century. And so all the standing dead timber has already fallen over. So there's no perch trees. I decked these receiver fences so firefighters can bring a hose down and fill up the tank. So as I was working there, birds just kept landing on that beaver lodge. Here's a tree swallows and a redwing and a robin and a kingbird. And then the next spring I came and a Canada goose was nesting on the lodge. So that beaver was it was one beaver was there for a month or two. One beaver, 1 month, I'll say. And just by creating that lodge, created all kinds of ecological value. So it's really quite exciting. So that's my business, and I'd be glad to help you any of you in your districts if you need it. And thank you again for having me here.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll kick it off. Did you just say $500,000 for a half an acre?
No, 1 acre.
1 acre.
Yeah, and that's probably high, but I imagine they probably averaged in the hundreds of thousands. But I was just trying to make a point. And they're very poor. They're often right next to highways or inside clover leaves. Just horrible places for wildlife.
Yeah.
So yeah, these beaver flowages have a vast value, and they're much better than those man-made ones.
Can you speak a little bit to, have you changed your devices due to increased flooding? And or what happens when these sites do get a huge inundation?
Oh, that's a great, I'm glad you brought that up. I meant to say that because that's another issue that they mentioned on Tuesday at this dam meeting, that these devices can't accommodate high flows. Well, you get the same high flows at all the culvert sites. And my strategy is to build that receiver fence as low as I can, and still keep beavers from going over. And so then when you get your big flood, it just flows over the top. I never want my devices to be the limiting factor when floods hit. And what's the beginning of your question?
Do you have to change your
bigger
design or make them bigger because of increased flows?
No, I mean, I've always had to design for,
Floods.
Hurricane Irene or something. And, I try to build them with this is my only heavy equipment I have. I try to build them just as rigid and rugged as I can. And you can really do that well with a wooden frame. But no, I've been responding over the decades to basically my own failures. And when the beavers defeat me, and I say, obviously, I got to make these bigger and better. So that's what's driven me.
When a flood comes, it's still that culvert that is the limiting factor for.
Yeah, the road culvert or the dam outlet.
Right.
I always want those to be the limiting, you just expect the water to come up and quickly start flowing over the top of that fence. So plus a tall fence, it's not going to take the strain of a flood very well.
And can you speak to a little bit about how you've worked in Moncton with the town to help deal with their beaver conflicts?
Yeah, they've been wonderful. And I've worked for them, I guess, for 5 years. So they really, they want to eliminate the problem.
So how many?
And this is the only way to do it. And yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. So the beaver, I wrote this to you guys too, but the beaver human conflict is really limited, thank goodness, because beavers are really limited on the landscape. They may only occupy 3% of Vermont. It's beaver damming habitat, low gradient areas on small streams. And so in a given town, you may have, who knows what it is, but it's a small average number, maybe 5 chronic conflict points. And if you just eliminate those with a high quality flow device, I can eliminate the problem for many decades for a town in in a couple weeks. But if you don't, then you have many conflict events at the same spot over the years because you're just leaving a naked culvert just waiting for the next dispersing beaver to clog it. More about Moncton. Well, yeah, I mean, they just have a wonderful attitude. They just, they just want to eliminate the problem. So I've followed this work because I want to create wildlife habitat. I've pursued it for so long because I think that keeping live beavers in ecosystems is the greatest way to do it. I mean, they work for free and they do amazing things. It's a tremendous opportunity. But as a bonus, it can save a town or an individual or a state so much money in maintenance and property damage costs. So that's been a wonderful bonus. So it's very rare do you get sort of this double-barreled type of opportunity.
Can you give us some numbers with that? Like, so how much has Moncton saved by?
Oh, yeah, it's hard to say, but I mean, there are a few organizations that have done studies and, like in Virginia, I did over 40 flow devices in Virginia back at, 20 so years ago. And they were quickly saving hundreds of thousands of dollars and probably well into the millions by now. And there's a few other studies out there. I know I worked in Andover, New Hampshire. This is on my website, the Andover case study. And a selectman there went back through their records and tried to come up with some figures as to what, not protecting culverts had cost a town in road damage and maintenance. It was the same thing. It was quickly get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It just is a never ending cycle unless, I mean, we had no conflicts during the fur trade, right? No clogged culverts. So if you can drive that beaver population down to a very, very low level, then you're not going to have very many conflicts. Worst imaginable ecological and hydrological, if you will, management. And I pray that that's not where Vermont's headed. I think the people of Vermont, there's a growing population of people in Vermont that recognize that we need to be better environmental stewards. And they recognize the value of beavers. A lot of them in Moncton, a couple organizations have sprouted up, the Vermont Beaver Association and the Vermont Beaver Collective. So there's just growing movement, and they're just people that want a healthier environment, basically. And so it's a really good opportunity.
Do members have further questions? Representative Austin and then Pritchard.
What's the cost? Can you give an
Yeah.
estimate of the cost of building?
Yes, yeah, good question. Yeah, I've just been quoting, and every site's different,
Mhm.
and I work around the country and in Europe. So, how far I have to travel matters too. But I've just to get people in the ballpark, I've been saying in the vicinity of $4,000.
Or
Yep. Does
reasonable?
that sound like a lot?
No,
Oh, good.
I thought you said.
No, that's
40.
not good. That's bad. I know.
Oh.
See, I'm in this awful position where I don't want to, I'm afraid I'm going to scare people with the price. And then oftentimes they'll hear that and they'll go, they're used to spending as selectmen or legislators, they're used to spending a lot of money on the infrastructure. And they go, wow, that's nothing. It feels like nothing to me, but I'm in a bind because something about our society that we don't value wetlands. We don't really value beavers. And so it's just, nobody, very rarely, Moncton has done this, I think, but very rarely does a town put a line item into, for flow devices. It's like, it's not, we're not thinking in those terms, but all that can change. And if it's going to change anywhere, I mean, why not this, supposedly really progressive state that cares about the environment and is small enough that you can come meet your legislators.
How long could a town count on a deceiver lasting them?
Oh, I'm hoping, I sometimes I say 50 years. I mean, 40 years. It might be 30. I mean, it's hard to know, but they are built really well. And, the durable fencing is crucial and it's a really strong frame. And so I think the wood, it's pressure treated wood. Unless it's underwater, then I use raw spruce. But when it's exposed to air, you don't want the wood to decay. Underwater, it won't. And so that may be the first thing to go. And, you know, even if that frame went, I think the fencing would still hold together for quite a while.
Representative Pritchard.
So two of the three of my questions have been answered. Maintenance, what kind of maintenance is required with these?
Very little.
Okay,
Very little if you have built a really good flow device and so on. Again, but there's exceptions. I mean, sometimes my filters will get buried and, you know, I almost don't consider that a maintenance issue. I consider that, okay, it's a design issue. I got to up the design. But in terms of just like cleaning, it's just not very much at all. I mean, and really almost, you know, really negligible compared to the maintenance of having to clean unprotected culverts.
Representative Labor.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, I'm Larry Labor from the Northeast Kingdom. And I bought the land in 1995. It's a viable beaver. It was about 3 to 4 acres in size. Through the years, I've had nests of blue heron that come back every year. That competed with ducks so that they cohabitated there because there was enough room. I wanted to preserve the area. So I got a hold of the state, and a man by the name of Keith Weaver says, oh, you need a beaver baffle system. Well, there's no road to this pond. So we worked. We pulled in a 12-inch pipe, and we pulled in the wire cage, but it was in a roll. It was not a cage yet. We had to build it on site. It worked. The hardest part of installing that beaver baffle system was finding a potato fork with a long handle to cut into a V-slot in the head wall of the dam so that you could control the water table depth. That worked well until they ate themselves out of house and home. Then they departed. So that ended my fly fishing. Because 3 years later in March, when we had a wet spell, there was no maintenance on the dam. And away it went.
Yeah.
And it all went south. It high and dried my canoe. It's now still there. Been there for 20 years. But until this year, it took 6 years for regeneration of willows and food materials for those beavers. Now they have returned, which makes me very happy. But there's a destroyed beaver baffle system. They were so smart. They plugged that thing right off quick. Within a year, they had it plugged. I mean, there's a reason for the term busy little beavers. They did work at night and they did plug it. So that brought the water up to the point, and it coincided with their lack of feed. So they booked out. And therein lies the problem. It's a long ways to go to try to restore something because it's deep in the woods and it's at the basin of 3 mountains. So it's a natural wetland. I'm happy they're back, but what do I do to keep it back?
Well, you need a better flow device.
Yeah,
I mean,
afraid you're going to say that.
I mean, if you're concerned about the dam breaking again in the future,
Mhm.
if that's, and it sounds like it was an expensive event.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm really glad you brought that point up because that is an issue and you know, that catastrophic dam breach. And it's pretty predictable, the types of flowages where that is a threat. It's a big reservoir. And oftentimes it's a very short dam, which can grow tall quickly. And so, yeah, those can be dangerous. And it's like almost every other type of conflict with beavers. The only way to solve that problem is with a flow device or a non-lethal approach. Because if you kill the beavers, you know, it's up in the woods in your case, you know, and then you breach the dam. Well, a new beaver arrives and he patches that up and you got that threat that's been restored and you may not even be aware of it. So you got to hold the water down. You can't let that reservoir get big. And so in those dangerous sites, you just put a good big pipe system or flow device in at a low level. so the reservoir can never get huge.
That was the reason for cutting the V wedge.
Yeah. But I tell you, yeah, I mean, they have to be built so well. The filters have to be really big. They have to have a whirlpool break. I use 6-inch mesh, generally speaking. And the trouble with that is beavers come in all sizes. And so small beavers can go in and cause trouble. So I do a series of interior walls inside the filter called Misery multipliers. And so that just essentially destroys the internal damming environment for any small beavers. I want to use the relatively coarse mesh because it's not going to get clogged by leaves and floating debris as readily as the next option, which is 4-inch mesh. No beavers will go through 4-inch, but it'll clog, lots of leaves will catch. So I just put in those interior walls. So I mean, these are just a couple of examples combined with the epoxy coated fencing and size, big, of the bare minimum you really need to do it with a filter on the end of a pipe system. So I'd love to come up and help you.
You mentioned that you've had beavers at your house for 50 years.
Yeah,
Is that continuous?
yeah.
And they haven't eaten all their food. How many beavers?
I mean, again, every wetland is different in its ability to support beavers, every one. But as I said in my paper, the mere process, like if you panic and you kill the beavers and then you lose the reservoir, then there's no chance of getting cattails and water shield and those types of critical food sources that the beavers can't deplete. And so by keeping the beavers there and keeping our reservoirs intact, those plants have come in. And so the beavers are eating all summer long, they're just, eating aquatic vegetation.
Last question. Has anyone mapped the extent of prior to European settlement, the extent of beavers in Vermont?
Well, you could, because it's all based on physics.
Has anyone done
It's
it?
the same place. What?
Has anyone done it?
No, but you could, somebody who's good with GIS could do it with a few keystrokes.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just beautiful in a way. It's so predictable. And, low gradient areas and small streams. I mean, that's exactly what I mapped when I was in graduate school in Maine. And in there, it was 1.5% of the landscape. So I've added a little, and it's gonna be a greater percentage in flat areas, smaller percentage in states like Vermont. But it's not, a lot of people have this image of beavers just everywhere, and that'll never happen because they can't dam on slopes, even a moderate slope. It's not economical for them. They're all about economics. And then on a big, I'm repeating myself from my paper, but yeah, anything more than a moderately sized watershed, you get high flows and a dam blows out. And then the beavers are incredibly vulnerable to predators, and they have, all that energy they have to expend constantly rebuilding dams. So that really keeps them, they don't do the calculations, obviously it's just all instinctive. It's an amazing thing, but they have a real good idea of where not to dam.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentation. We do need to take a break now before our next agenda item. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
It's great to meet you.
Members, let's